Hello, everybody. Welcome to the absolute best conversations you're going to hear at Reinforce this week. My name is Hart Rossman. I look after security here in the field at AWS, and I am joined by Erica Dean and Evan McHenry from Robinhood. We're going to get into their backgrounds in just a minute, and we're going to talk about the insights they have as security leaders coming from their experience in Robinhood Markets. We're going to talk a little bit about balancing speed and trust, security as a shared responsibility, their leadership journey, and then end with some lessons learned that they and we think you can benefit from. So with that, Erica, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at Robinhood?
Absolutely. My name is Erica Dean. I am the Chief Security Officer at Robinhood, but not as my title implies. I actually have a little bit more under my hood than just security. I also run our privacy organization, enterprise resiliency, and corporate engineering. So it is very interesting all the time to have such a large breadth of technology and security built into one. But one of the things I really like about Robinhood is that we have a value called safety always. And I really do feel like it spans from the executive all the way down to the employee base, all the way up to the board. And that makes me feel really proud to work for Robinhood. Matter of fact, it's one of the reasons why I report directly to the CEO, which is actually very rare for a CSO to report to, because security is of top of mind for him.
That's fantastic. I love, there's so much to love about that. One dimension is this idea that just out of the gate, the culture sets this expectation around safety, security, privacy, correctness. And then, as you pointed out, it is super rare for security executives to report in directly to the CEO. That happens to be the case also at AWS, right? And so Amy reports into Matt, and the same thing at Amazon for us, right? Steve Schmidt reports into Andy. And the relationship you can develop and the message that sends to the business and your customers is unparalleled.
I completely agree. I think that it allows for me to be able to have an organization that moves with the business and the speed of the business because we're in the conversations as they start to happen.
Super cool. And so, Evan, tell us a little bit about what you do at Robinhood.
Yeah, so I'm Evan McHenry. I'm Deputy CISO and Head of Corporate Engineering. So I lead our security engineering and security operations teams, as well as our IT functions, which we've got centralized all under one group called Corp Eng. So we're IT organizations that's very focused on engineering principles, software development, SRE functions as well. And we manage everything from Oracle Cloud to Google Workspace to parts of the AWS stack to IT support generally, AV, etc. So it's also a pretty large scope, and I've been working with Erica for the past 2.5, 3 years, very closely, and over the past year directly as her deputy CISO.
Super cool. And I know a little later on we're going to get into your journey in a little bit more depth. But since you brought it up, I'm kind of curious how IT and security engineering ended up under your hat.
Yeah, so I think it was about 2 years ago. What we were finding was a lot of friction between, in particular, blue team, corporate security, and then the corporate engineering team, in which we're just running into a lot of mixed accountability. Decisions were taking too long to make. So the former CSO and I had an idea of just trying it out and merging the security function in under corporate engineering and embedding the corporate security team kind of as a layer across all of Corp Eng. And I think we didn't realize how valuable that would be at the time. It was more of an experiment to try things out. But with us being a cloud-first customer of almost all of our products, actually, all of our IT people should have security mindset. And it had a lot of unexpected values come out for us as a department. And then we just started doing more and more, and here we are.
Rock on. Yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense. In hindsight, it seems obvious, but at the time, it was probably a bit of a risky decision.
We got a lot of questions here.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things that make it most risky, especially in a fintech, like a financial institution, is you have to worry about segmentation, like separation of duties. Mm-hmm. And so making sure that the structure is appropriate. I remember having all these conversations with my predecessor and with Evan to say, no, we have to make sure that we design it correctly. I think it could totally make sense because you have that synergy, but at the same time, you have to make sure that there's a little bit of separation because this part of the organization, the CorpSec piece, will monitor and govern the other side. And so it was a lot of thought that went into it. While we didn't understand like long-term benefit, like how far we would take it, and we ended up obviously merging a lot more than just that one component. It took a lot of thought process to make sure that we were doing it the right way, so we wouldn't run into trouble from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. And that's always like part of the tension, right? Is you want to move fast, you want to keep the bar high, and it's like this almost a sixth sense you need on like where are the right places to intentionally introduce friction, right? And where to like add the lubricant to make things go super fast.
Agreed. I think that what we find is while we're working through a problem set, truly understanding the business is a major component of that. And then also understanding the regulations that bind us from a security or a privacy standpoint really allows for you to be able to like interweave it so that you're not going into a landmine.
Totally. So let's maybe get into that a little bit more. We're talking about moving fast, staying secure. Let's maybe start a little bit. You've told us about some of the how, both of you, but you haven't talked about the why in terms of like, what does moving fast and staying secure mean to you? Right? Why is it important? What's your philosophy behind it?
Well, I think it's really important. Part of why I like being in security is so that it's not just about feeling like I'm empowered to protect like something, right? Although superhero syndrome is definitely a thing. But I think it's also how do you help the company that you're working for be able to progress from a business standpoint at the speed at which they'd like to move. I will have to say, after working in two technology type companies that are also financial institutions, Robinhood works really, really fast. We move at the speed of I don't even know what. And so being able to like keep up with that is exciting, also scary at the same time because you have to make sure you don't miss a step because it would mean bad things could happen. And I think that it's just really exciting to be able to be able to bridge those two things, like empowering the business to move at that pace, but then still feel really good about where you are from a security standpoint.
And so, Evan, like, what's the why behind what you do?
Well, I think, to Erica's point about being able to move really quickly, one of the things, being an IT and security leader, I'm very focused on is keeping everyone maximally productive. And what I've found is if I can embed security into all these productivity tools and make it the fastest path for people to take to get their jobs done, because everyone around Robinhood is incentivized to move as fast as possible and disrupt. We have extreme ownership and extreme accountability. So like if I'm getting in the way of a business leader getting some money or supporting a customer, I'm up on the chopping block and I'm going to have to explain to our CEO why I'm slowing things down. So by principle, I encourage my teams to like, hey, take these moments, figure out how to make people more productive and raise the security bar all at the same time. And for me, that is a very unique position to be in and provides me just a ton of excitement and knowing that I'm not only better securing the company, but I'm also helping them help our customers in their financial journey more quickly as well.
So, Erica, please.
I was just going to add on. I think that that's one of the reasons why that synergy works so well, right? From a corporate engineering standpoint, if you already have security somewhat like embedded in that process, then you're able to like implement things because you're already thinking about it because you're already part of that security org. So that has actually been one of the largest benefits that we've seen about merging those two is because now once you implement something, you already know that it has the security embedded into whatever it is we're trying to make something productive. And so it's like double, right?
Yeah, totally. So actually, if we stay with you for a sec, Erica. So Evan touched on it, but I'd be interested in your point of view, and then we can kind of get a follow-on. Talk about sort of escalations. I don't mean security issues. I mean, when something's in the business is going on and it needs leadership attention, right? Maybe we need to change something in our engineering pipeline. Maybe there's a regulation coming down the pike that's a little bit different than we operate today. How do you approach working with your peers to think about business level escalations and then drive that into the security behavior of the organization?
Yeah, there's a few different ways that I think about it. One, it's one of the reasons why we have entity CISOs, right, embedded with the business leaders so that they can have ongoing, more frequent conversations. On top of that, being part of the CEO's leadership team, we meet every single week to talk about issues that are top of mind. From a regulation standpoint, having the relationship with the leaders within legal and compliance really help to make sure that's streamlined, making sure that your teams are well partnered. So more or less, it's about building those relationships, right? Relationships are probably one of the most key forms of progression to be able to move quickly, because if they don't know you exist, they're not going to tell you. If they're concerned about something and they're just going to go to Vlad, right, or CEO,
Right.
that's not helpful, right? You want them to come to you. And the best way to do that is build the relationships both with the business, the product leaders, and the technology partners that you have.
So if I can ask, how did you get that started? Like, it sounds like nirvana now, but it probably wasn't that way on day one.
What's funny is I think that it's probably one of the easiest things for me. I feel like, well, I don't proclaim to be a people person because I don't really like being social with a lot of people. Um, but I think that it is one of the things that is most natural for me to think, I can't help you if I don't understand you, right?
Yeah.
So for me, the first thing I did when I came to Robinhood 4.5 years ago, while I wasn't in this role, the first thing I did was learn my business, understand exactly what made them tick, what were they thinking about from a future standpoint, how did they think through, like, what were they going to do next, whether that is moving to another country, evolving their product line, whatever the case might be. And I continue to have touch points with them. And the only way that they knew that I was their person is if I had those conversations.
Right on.
And so it allowed for me to move really quickly from a brokerage standpoint, because that's actually where I started at Robinhood, was brokerage. And then that kind of just spread, because then I was like interested, like, why was this happening in this part of the company? Or why was this happening? So I would also say, don't ever limit yourself to only your role. Curiosity is a good thing. And learning about another part of the company and how they operate helps you in your own role.
Yeah, and I know you say you're a little bit introverted. I'm not buying that. Here you are up on stage in front of all these people. But I will say, though, I love this idea of leading with curiosity, right? Because if you are somebody who maybe has an obscure user interface, or maybe you're reluctant to initiate a conversation, but you're technical in nature, which both of you are, starting by asking those questions, going down that rabbit hole together, can build those relationships without it being some sort of awkward, right, dance to figure out whose hand you shake first kind of thing.
Well, I mean, think about it, though. How can you build a good product if you don't understand what they need?
Yeah.
You can't. You end up building something that no one's going to use. It's the same reason why you, as an owner of a company, would want to have a focus group that goes out to your customers to make sure that what you build for your clients and your customers are going to actually be what they want and need. If you're not doing that, you're going to build something and it may work, but it may not work. And you don't want to take that chance, because that's a lot of money down the drain.
And so, speaking of building things that may or may not work, Evan, how do you kind of balance that relationship building that Erica's talking about with, I'm sure, the just enormous amount of technical signal you're getting about the way the business is functioning?
Yeah, well, I think, one of the really important things at Robinhood is we have many different cultural philosophies, but more importantly is we all are focusing on one Robinhood. We're focusing on what's best for our customer, what's best for the company. And once you start to embody that across the company and you get that baked in, you can trust everyone is just doing what's best for the company, not what is best for their vertical or their function. So whenever I'm working with a PeopleX partner about, expanding internationally and having to think through how's Workday set up and all these configurations, I can start to see really what's important to them is that we onboard the employees. And what's important to me is we're onboarding them with our account permissions and all of our offboarding controls and all of our detection capabilities. And then I can start to design solutions that are more purpose-built for that individual. They're getting what they want. They don't care about all the additional things that I'm adding in. And being able to understand what their business needs are. And then also, if I'm talking to one person, I know I need to communicate one way with that one person. It's like know your audience.
Yeah.
And how technically depth do I go to be able to explain a concept to one person, because I don't want to lose them. I think separately, also having the trust that whenever I'm actually digging in and saying, no, we can't do it like that, they know actually there's a dragon over there that Evan's protecting us from.
Right.
I need to do it this way. So I think, one, as far as understanding where the business is going and their technical direction, having really good governance processes set up about who really can buy software, who to safety by design principles, how are we ingesting software to make sure it meets our governance and our standards requirements, and then me as an IT leader, I'm signing off on most of those purchases. if I see something that comes across that hasn't hit safety by design or doesn't have SSO by default, some of these things, or no logs is another really scary one, then I'm having a conversation and explaining it to the business leader. This is actually a kind of dangerous risk. And before we go through a risk acceptance process,
Yeah.
I want you to understand this might be a legitimate problem that you should probably spend a little bit more time looking for another vendor on or something.
Totally. How often do leaders come to you? Maybe not how often, but maybe you could talk about what it's like when leaders come to you proactively with questions as opposed to it having to be some sort of escalation.
I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things. Actually, it shows me that I have trust, and you know, they trust my department as well. I think what it's like often whenever you're experiencing it is, hey, I have a problem and I need a little bit of help on this, and then explain, like just asking them questions about, hey, what are you trying to achieve? Why is there an urgent timeline? Where does this fit in the company priorities? Oh, like which executive is sponsoring this? And then I can go kind of like have a sidebar with them and just make sure everything's above board. But in that moment, everybody, whenever they finally decide to contact myself or Erica, it's generally like a cry for help. It's kind of like hey, we have a problem. So there's already a little bit of sniff test that's gone on there that, there's something going on. And then the escalation, I think it's not preferred whenever it's a sidebar escalation or somebody saying, hey, Bob or Sue are getting in my way. But at the same time, it's a good indicator that there is trust that we have a culture of blameless postmortems. It's not, no one's going to get their job ended because there's one escalation. And two, you're going to be able to tell me, is that person right or wrong? And Eric and I not always just throwing our team under the bus and saying, they were wrong, let me help you out. So we need to be able to know when to back them, because if you don't do that enough, suddenly you become the easy road to just get everything done and they lose faith in your team.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say one thing to add on is being proactive. So annual training or quarterly training or half-year training, whatever your company does, making sure that security team is part of the actual engineering roadmap planning and the business roadmap planning is super critical, right? Then you set goals together. You already know what your plan is. You already know that you're going to be involved in the conversation. So the escalations become less important because they've already reached out, already engaged your team. I think that one of the things that I measure of whether or not there's success is how many times does a leader come to me versus like one of my leaders.
Yeah.
Because they should be going to them, right?
Right.
That's why we establish those relationships, why we establish teams that are dedicated to their business. And so to me, that's a form of measurement of understanding, is this working? Is this successful?
Absolutely. And you said something earlier which really resonates with me. You said the magic number 52, right? Which is 52 times a year you have that executive security conversation with the leadership team, not just the people who are passionate about security. And as I've had this opportunity to work with customers and partners around the world, it is a magic number. If your organization only talks about security monthly or quarterly or only twice a year to brief the board, the kinds of culture, the kinds of technological innovation you're talking about is incredibly difficult to achieve. But if you're having that conversation 52 times a year as leaders, it sets the foundation for it to start to permeate the organization, right?
Well, it's not even just those conversations. We have an annual security conference that's held within Robinhood,
Oh, yeah.
by which they can come and understand the different functions that we have within our organization, interact with how the technology works and how we actually secure things. We also do, every time I visit a new site, we'll sit there and have a fireside chat with the teams that are there at the local sites. So it is every interaction helping to remind them that we're here to support them and what our teams actually represent and how we can actually help.
And so I'd love to hear, go ahead, Evan.
And I think also one of the benefits of having such broad scope between Eric and I is, if you're talking to me with my IT leader hat on, or Erica with her governance hat on or risk hat on, you're also getting a security conversation at the same time. And I think with also having really good governance and controls set up through the software approval process or safety by design, or the privacy functions Erica owns, you're very accessible as a leader, and that also demystifies like Evan and Erica are these like
Yeah.
security monsters that are lurking in the back and they don't want us to get things done. I think being approachable and having those fireside chats and the AMAs and going to women in tech and talking about these things helps people realize security is not a scary group. They also just want us to like help our customers and achieve our mission. They just have a different lens that they're thinking through of protecting us. And I think over the past 3 or 4 years, like that has really shifted. The more and more Eric and I have done fireside chats and all hands, which are their own terrifying experience. I think that has really helped people realize, like, oh, whenever we get a DLP alert and somebody from the SOC is coming towards us, something went on and they're here to help me.
Yeah, I mean, that is so true, right? Like having that authentic leadership style where you're a person first, you're really part of the team, you're trying to help achieve this outcome, this one Robinhood mentality, because my guess is that most senior people in the organization have regular interaction with you. But when there's a security question or concern a couple of levels down, the only time they chat with you might be in that one crucible moment, right? And knowing that you're human, knowing that you're empathetic, knowing that you've got a blameless culture around escalations and resolution, um, it's got to be something that's really, although I think maybe challenging, right? Because you got to solve an issue, it's supportive, right? Everybody dives in, everybody gets it done. And to your point, you're not just some ogre in the background, right? You're really out in front trying to lead the way and help them get from a bump in the night to everything's all right.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's difficult is time management for sure. Like Eric and I are like back-to-back meetings for week on end, but at the same time realizing that it only takes one misconfigured SSO app or one user's account that somebody took MFA off of because they were trying to get something done for a business owner, and helping explain that to somebody who's saying, I don't understand why this has to be so hard. I just need to do this. I need this one direct sign-on application that has all of its data hosted in Russia. Like being able to explain to them, like, actually that person is doing the right thing. Let me elaborate a little bit further about what this would look like and walking through the attack with them. And I think that helps leaders realize, oh, okay, my bad. And then they back down. Or we say, you know what, we can probably come up with a creative solution here. We just need some time.
Super cool. And so, Erica, you mentioned earlier some of the foundations that the Robinhood culture of safety and security is built on. We've talked a little bit about when team members come to you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you're empowering them to take care of some of this on their own, putting up the right guardrails and letting them get back to business.
Yeah, I think that part of setting up your organization and even the culture at the company starts with everybody else, helping them to understand like they are all part of the solution. Like security is not how a company is secured. We are only one piece of it. Matter of fact, we actually don't do most of the implementation when we talk about security. We have to get other people to do, right? When you think about engineering and the applications, we're not going in and configuring those applications. We're pointing out that there's a problem. But think about it another way. If you've empowered those organizations to think more like security and to really want to secure it themselves, it's less you're going to have to look at and like think through like, hey, we now found 10 problems, but now we only found like one or two because they're already thinking ahead. And part of that's building the culture of the company to say security is everyone's problem, everyone's solution. And so therefore now everyone's part of that. Matter of fact, that's even come down in our all hands from our CEO of like security is an everyone problem, not just a Erica's problem.
That's all, everybody can be a security champion.
Everyone can be a security champion. And I think that does help with the fireside chats, the all hands presentations, all of these little interactions. It kind of helps them feel more empowered that they can actually make the decision. The other piece is that when they come with a problem and it's about prioritization, having the discussion, like sometimes the security element might not be the top priority. Having that discussion, understanding what is the give and take. Perhaps a fraud issue needs to take precedence, right? And sometimes it might be a business one. I don't know, but maybe. I think really just being transparent and open and having the conversation about prioritization, and not even just at a leadership perspective, what Evan talked about, even from an engineering perspective or from anyone from even a CX agent. Like we do side-by-sides with CX agents. Like I have my team actually sit beside CX agents to hear calls, to understand like what are they protecting. I think that's really important. But that also is empowering for the CX agent because then they want to start telling you about, hey, I see this sort of thing, or we're doing this thing and I'm kind of worried. Should I be worried? And so I think that all of those interactions are part of building the culture to make everyone feel empowered, like they're part of that solution.
Absolutely. That actually just reminded me. I freely admit I haven't done this in a few years, but I remember early in my Amazon journey, I was invited to go spend time with our CX agents and support, and they put me on a pigtail, and I got to listen in on a number of these cases. And occasionally, they actually let me try to help a little bit, right? And it's a whole different world of customer connection when you're really on that front line, right? Hearing directly from the customer in the moment what's most important to them. Right? It's not always what you expect it to be, but it's always authentic and it's very direct.
And I think that the CX agent really appreciates it. It makes them feel like they're valued in a way by which they'd never thought that they would be interacting with another part of the company that's usually like behind the scenes, closed doors, secretive, right? And to be there with another person, including like leaders, like executives, right? We have them sit beside them. It doesn't matter what level, because I don't feel like you're ever too tall in a company to
Exactly.
help out from a CX perspective and actually understand where the problems are coming from.
That's a super good reminder. This is like for real. You're getting it on camera. I'm going to be reaching out to frontline support after our conversation and seeing if I can get an afternoon or two with them to see if I can pigtail in.
I highly support it.
Cool. Thanks for the inspiration. I love it. I love it. Evan, I'm actually kind of curious, building on that, we're talking about, these trade-offs in investment strategy, right? And resource allocation. Maybe you could talk about one of the technical decisions or investments that you think you've gotten a lot of mileage out of in terms of security at Robinhood.
Yeah, I think I'll give one example, but preface it. I think one of the biggest decisions that have been made that have led to just a huge amount of efficiency is our principles. And I'll cite one here. It's lean and disciplines. That doesn't mean we're cheap. It means that we're really thoughtful about how do we most efficiently solve a problem at first principles, which is another principle that we have. You'll notice Eric and I are just like reciting Robinhood principles. It's a very important part of our culture and, helps us in our decision making. But as part of that, for example, if we're looking at, a recent outage that one cloud provider had last week, and we suddenly start to realize why is our app going down? What's going on? And we realize, oops, we're multi-cloud. And we're supposed to be all on AWS. Suddenly, we all sit down and say, well, something went wrong here in how we design this system. And our principle is we're going to stay on a single cloud provider. And we start unpacking that, and we realize, someone made a misconfig, and they're calling an API on GCP, and now here we are. And going back and saying, well, we all know our decision at this point in time was single cloud, which is probably the easiest thing for security to do, is just stay on a single cloud provider if you want to be a lean team. Going back and saying, we're going to fix that. We're not going to continue to explore that opportunity because we have all these different principles that we're citing, and we're going to just remove that dependency right now. I think that has been something that's helped our detection and response team scale, figuring out our logging story, being able to, even on the IT side, start to figure out where our internally built tools are going to be hosted and making some decisions about those cloud providers. I think understanding the long-term efficiency of your technical stack and then the principles of which you want to stick to, and then continually reinforcing them anytime a SEV happens has been just a great thing for us.
That's absolutely crucial. I can tell you from experience as well. Those principles or tenets, right? Different companies will call them different things. It's your operating system, right? And it gives you that clarity of purpose. It gives you some guardrails, but it also, I think, when done well, and it sounds like you've done this well at Robinhood, provides some good tension too, right? Sometimes those principles will pull against one another and also help you break the tie, right? You can prioritize certain principles over others to get past that logjam, right?
Yeah, and I think give you a bonus answer on technical decisions here. One of the things that caused Eric and I a lot of consternation 2 years ago was identity and access management. We
Identity
just
never
it just happened
bedevils
yesterday
anyone.
again.
Yeah.
But we had a really sprawling issue of multiple identity providers. We didn't know which permissions were coming where. Our UARs were all over the place. And we sat down and tackled it from first principles and said, actually, at the end of the day, all of this is resulting in a group in this SaaS provider. let's just build our own sidecar service that's going to manage permissions in AWS with that provider and centralize all of our stuff down there. And suddenly we started seeing all these additional issues unlock. UARs became much more simple. Understanding how do we do just-in-time access was very simple. Now we're looking at, multi-party approvals for production changes, et cetera. That was another one that I think, in retrospect, was causing us a huge amount of inefficiency and just leadership decision making, and then also software engineering productivity, infra productivity, figuring out where to go to get the right role, and then having to do 15 different UARs, terrible and inefficient process. And streamlining down to one provider has been very helpful.
I would just add on that I think that if you notice what he was saying is that we take a step back. When we have a problem, you don't just try to solve that tiny problem, right? You take a step back, understand how can you more breadthly solve the problem. And I think that doing that allows you to work faster and more lean than what you would typically, because if you're trying to solve every tiny little project in its own little problem space, now you are trying to multiply your team in ways by which you can't. Pulling back and understanding, can I solve multiple problems with one solution? It's much more efficient and allows you to use your team more wisely.
Super cool. I know we didn't actually prepare for this question, but I'm going to take a risk and ask it anyway. When you've got a company that has such a strong security culture and such a strong culture of leadership principles, how do you think about onboarding new executives, right, who probably come with a strong point of view from somewhere else, right? What's that like?
But I think part of it is when you're hiring, you're also looking for someone that fits well with your culture. You can have super amazing leaders, but that doesn't mean that they can fit in every company, right? Every company has a different culture, a different way of operating, and you want that to be smooth. You want diverse ideas, but you also want to make sure that as those diverse ideas are coming through, right, that you are able to work with the culture. If you can't keep up with the speed, for example, probably won't be successful and you're going to end up being gone, right? That's just how it is. High value on expectations, making sure that you understand. So the line of questioning that we do is pretty extensive during an interview. We go through a panel type interview to make sure that we hire the right people. From an onboarding perspective, the first thing they get is the principles, right? Helping them to understand, what are we about? What are our values? How do we like to operate? And then we open it up to understanding, hey, do you see anything? We actually review our principles on an annual basis to say, hey, is there things that we want to modify because our culture has changed? Robinhood from 4.5 years ago is not the same Robinhood as today.
I bet, yeah.
And so we have evolved, and I think that that's one of the things about our company that I love is that we have surveys we send out, we talk to people. When executives are onboarding, we listen to how they have lived their life at a prior company. Do we want to adopt? And it's being intentional.
Yeah.
Not everything we'll adopt. We will sometimes have to have them modify their behaviors. But at the end of the day, we do have a strong culture of principles. But I think that the leadership team is very tight. We do meet a lot. We do talk a lot. I think there's a point where it feels very much like a cohesive family because you feel so open to be able to share your thoughts and ideas or feedback, which allows us to adapt and to evolve when we need to.
When we hire leaders, certainly in my organization or the teams I work very closely with, we get a lot of these type A, very capable leaders who come in. We're looking for, technical aptitude and cultural fit. Sounds like very similar. And they always come in 100% of the time. They come in with their 100-day plan or their 90-day plan, right? Because they want to come in and make a big impact fast, right? Because they're a big leader and we love them for it. The thing I always tell them is, look, your job is to become Amazonian. You will be so much more effective as a leader here when you can move from saying, this is how I do it or how I want it done, how I think it's done, to this is how we need to get it done, and this is how we might think about it, right? And that always takes longer than you expect, right? As a type A, right, experienced leader, you think you're going to figure it all out in a month. And it always takes a little bit longer than you expect. So I encourage people, come in, set big goals, shoot for the moon. But really, your number one job when joining our organization is to learn to become Amazonian. And then everything else is going to fall out of that.
I think one of the things that we've been learning a lot recently is consider your promotion from within story as well, particularly in the leadership levels. It really is, to your point, the more senior that you're hiring, the bigger the roll of the dice is, because one, it takes a little bit of a longer time to figure out, is this working out? Like, you need to give them time to see if they're able to affect change. Are they making the right decisions in the moment? They're executing on a roadmap that has already been established. So I think knowing, I agree, the biggest risk really in senior leader hires is culture fit. Like, technical signals you can get pretty quickly based on a resume and a couple hours of interviews, but I think I'm evaluating a lot more internal opportunities, like to move people up, that I know,
Yeah.
like, hey, I need to teach you a couple of these things, but you already know how to get things done in our unique way. But I think, to Erica's point, you mentioned about ensuring that we have thought diversity, right? There are moments where I think it's important to have someone that steps in and says, this principle is no longer serving our company. It is
Yeah.
actually affecting us in a way that, is impacting our ability to ship things or make decisions, and ensuring that they come with a well-rounded argument, and they're able to articulate that in a first principles way, preferably in a document,
Yep.
is really, really important, because you don't want to get stuck in principles or operating models that no longer serve the company. So I think there is a balance, but even identifying that leader is able to communicate in a way that affects change quickly in their tenure is a really good signal for us as well.
Absolutely.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
also, kind of piggybacking, it is funny. We do actually grow a lot internally. If you think about my role, I wasn't this when I got hired. I grew into this role. Evan wasn't in his role when he got hired. He grew into this role. So we do a lot of growing internally of our leaders to be able to promote within. And I think that's something also really special and really
It's
great.
almost like you knew what question was coming next. So, Erica, I would love to hear, and I'm sure the audience would as well, a little bit about your path to becoming CSO.
It was very untraditional. Also, I kind of fell into it. So I started my career off at a financial institution where I was the customer service representative. I was there for 2 years in that role. I didn't have any background in security, but I decided that doing customer service was not for me. I mean, I did get a couple marriage proposals during that time,
Oh my goodness.
and I got asked to go on a cruise. Super cool,
That
but
very
really
cool.
weird
Probably
all at the same
not
time.
in line with the employee handbook.
No, I did not accept them, in case you're wondering. But then I decided to apply for a data warehousing job because it said no experience necessary. I'm like, cool, I can learn. I'll apply. I applied. I got rejected. They rejected me and said, no, sorry, we're not gonna hire you on. But they passed my resume over to the information security organization, which was actually kind of neat. They came and they said, hey, we see that you increase productivity and morale. Can you come and do that for our identity access management? So my first role in security was actually IAM.
Cool.
And then I quickly moved over to vulnerability management. I did that for several years. I learned application security. I learned how to secure Unix and Linux systems, database security. And so that was really cool. And I kind of just bounced around to multiple roles within the security organization until one day they were like, hey, maybe you should try to do this entity CISO role. And I was like, what is that? And they were like, well, we have it for an IT organization. And it means that you're going to be responsible for the security for this tiny segment of the company, which is not really tiny because IT is really big. So I tried that out. But my favorite role was actually retail banking, because that was the first time that I got to experience working with the business and in such close proximity. It became like this triad where I got to be in line with the president of retail bank, in addition to the head, the CIO for the retail bank, and working with the product teams. That was the coolest thing. And being able to build that out kind of just progressed my career. Then I took on like a larger organization, which also included international space. And then I came to Robinhood. And it kind of started doing the same thing. And then all of a sudden, they were like, hey, do you want to be CSO? And I was like, no, not really. And they were like, please, come on. And I was like, okay. So that's how I became the CSO. And then they just kept adding parts of the organization, like privacy came last year. Before that was enterprise resiliency. Before that, corporate engineering. So yeah, it's been a journey.
That's awesome. It's a very diverse slate of things. And what's also interesting about your journey is that you did a couple full cycle loops. You started in one place, you learned, you kind of went back and started again and learned again, always moving forward, right? But being able to kind of cycle back and almost like check your knowledge and then take it to a new space.
I think that one of the most important things about career progression is always leveraging what you've learned.
Yeah.
There was one role that I did during that time period. I hated it, actually. It was for a full year. I was the chief of staff for the CISO, and I was like, oh, this is not good for me. It went from like coding, hands in like a Linux box, to like spreadsheets. That was like the worst
Oh,
change
yeah.
and transition. It was such a hard transition for me, that I only did it for 1 year. But that experience working with budgeting and financing of the organization actually helped me in this role and in my prior role to be able to like literally understand like how do you manage the budget to make sure that you can be lean at the same time as being able to like progress the organization and do really good security work. So all roles, no matter how small and how oddly shaped, always come back. CX is the same way. Notice how I said I require my team to sit with CX agents. There's a
Totally.
reason for that, right?
Yeah.
It's where I came from. I think that they have a different perspective, and they tend to be an opportunity by which things can happen very quickly, and bad things, right, in some cases.
And good things.
And good things. And so you want to make sure that you understand and have that connectivity. And I think it just helps to like tie it all together.
Absolutely. And so, Evan, I'm not slinging this. I'm reading it from the slide. Nerdy hacker. How did
Yeah.
you get started?
Well, I grew up not very far from Philadelphia in a very rural town where my elementary school had no computers. High school was just starting to get onto it. So I was always kind of like a tinkerer. My dad had a garage and mechanic shop, so I was toying around with cars. And then I discovered computers through some avenue, and my school got a bunch of Macs donated to them. So I was in 4th grade setting up like the first Mac network in the school district. I don't know why they let me do that. In high school, it was the first SQL database. They were still doing paper records, and then I dropped a table attack the SQL database, and I had to answer a lot of questions about that. But
My guess is there's some kid who's going to watch this on YouTube this afternoon who says the same thing about themselves with agentic workflows in their school today.
Oh yeah, they're gonna.
Right.
It's gonna be very interesting to see in 20 years which kids are on stage at AWS talking about like, oh yeah, I didn't go to school. I made an agent.
Yeah,
and
some
they did it
4th
for me.
grader who's
Yeah,
getting asked to deploy MCP servers
That's gonna
in their
be-
elementary school.
that's gonna be cool.
I'm sorry, but we digress.
Yeah. So
Sorry, back
I
to your
always,
journey.
I just was self-taught. So when I was a teenager, I just got into desktop networking support. I ran a ISP for 3 counties in Pennsylvania, moved them over from dial-up to DSL. And then I started getting into like, oh, I can break things now. So that's where the nerdy hacker came in, where I started to put the black hat on for a while and started toying around with some things and realized I didn't feel very good about that. Then I went into enterprise and IT engineering. And because of that period of knowing how to break things,
Yeah.
I started thinking about when I set up the IT systems or Salesforce or Oracle, how do I make sure Evan doesn't do that stuff to it? So I naturally just became like an IT security person, and then I moved into leadership and program management, but I've always been very hands-on. My team right now, probably, if any of them are listening, are saying like, maybe you can be a little hands-off, a little back up a little bit. But I think I never before Robinhood would have thought I was in an actual principled security leadership role, because I was always the one able to BS test the security people in the engineering roles I had been in. And now I'm here, and I think dual hatting the IT role and the CSO role, I struggle to imagine how I couldn't do that again in the future, because I can make every IT person a security person now, and I can walk them through their logic because I've experienced it about why they were just moving too quickly and they didn't think about one key thing that brought a whole system down. So.
Yeah, totally. I'm not going to go through my whole background, but I will just give one part that's maybe relevant. So I was also largely self-taught, arts and humanities guy the whole way, but always passionate about computing, always tinkering. And I had like early bulletin board systems running out of parents' house, trying to hog the phone line, that sort of thing. I started in security and was doing it for a number of years and realized I needed to get some additional education. And so I started a master's in computer engineering. And I really enjoyed that first semester. Right? But part of what I realized is that maybe it's a little bit hubris, I could continue to learn that on my own. What I still didn't understand was finance, accounting, marketing, strategy. And so I switched gears and I went after that MBA because from where I was in the organization at the time, I had unlimited access to computers and no insight into our finances. Right. And so I really wanted to like pick that part up. And that unlocked so many other opportunities for me in the future. Sort of knowing how the technology works, being willing to get my hands dirty, but also knowing how to get my project funded. Right. And then how to spend those resources wisely. Right. And so
I think that's
here we
one
are
thing
today.
Erica and I have excelled at because of our background and knowing like how to articulate the risk to, what happens if we try to launch a product without a pen test?
Yeah.
We don't launch the product because the regulators will destroy us. So being able to talk to, our head of treasury and talk and, hey, we need this headcount. Here's how we can self-fund it as much as we can. But if you don't do this, these are the implications to revenue generation. And it might feel a little weird to think that you need security people to launch a product, but you actually do.
Yeah.
And I think that having that business background and then working with other business-minded people like the finance departments and things is really critical to, I think, security leadership roles, because it's so easy to get pegged as, your security, you're just always asking for more. You can never get enough headcount. You can never get enough OpEx. The reaper will eventually come from finance when you become that kind of leader.
Yeah.
And it works for a while, but eventually, the economy turns around and finance is trying to find every dollar they can.
And, Erica.
I would say that I think that part of it is still going back to your audience. Finance is just another audience, helping them understand like the repercussions of why you might need something. And we do actually really try to self-fund and look at if there's like say someone leaves our organization and we have an open role, understanding, do you replace that exact role or is it better suited somewhere else in the organization?
Yeah.
So you actually really should be looking across the entire organization at all times, understanding where do you need resources depending on what you're working on, so you can best use the headcount that you have to make the best decisions. And so you're not putting one pressure on one team when this other team is like really, really struggling and really needs that resource.
Yeah. I mean, talk about thinking long term, right? And that always comes back to you, right? Like if you can help another team be successful, ultimately it makes us all successful, right? And people lean into that. And so, yeah, being gracious with resources always pays you back in the fullness of time.
Even as I mentioned earlier, security is not just our job, right? There are times where I will volley for resources for other organizations because I need them to implement security technology or configure their systems, and they don't have enough resources to focus on that because they're developing a product. But I need them to work on the security. So I will volley for resources for other organizations as well, or even give up some of my headcount to be able to fund that because we know how critical it is. And so understanding how everything operates in your company still comes back to that, right? You just need to understand
100%.
how things move and operate so you can make sure you're sourcing the right things.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of resource allocation and scaling yourself, how did you know it was the right time to have a deputy CISO?
Did I mention I have like 4 organizations? So I think that at some point last year, after I was given privacy as a bonus, I think that what really started to go through my head is how do I actually scale and go across the entire 4 organizations that I have and make sure that I'm not missing anything? And the answer is that you can't really do that alone. And while I had leaders over each one, what I realized is I really needed someone that I could like succession plan to grow into my role at some point in time, and to be able to have that person that I can like lean on to say, okay, you have visibility to this side, I'm going to keep it over here, and then we'll kind of come back and make sure that we're flipping and making sure we understand the whole picture. But it allows for you to be able to span yourself way further than what you thought you could. The other piece is like having a deputy is really, really great because it allows me to like make sure I have that, but then also having key other components, like having a tech lead that makes sure that you actually understand that's working closely with both Evan and I to make sure it spans across all of our organization, not just security, kind of like ties that piece together from a technology piece as well. So making sure you have core components is really important. So one of those is
super cool. And do you feel like you made that decision at just the right time, that you waited too long, that you were early?
That's a good question. I think I probably waited a little bit too long. I didn't make it until probably 4 months after I got privacy. And by that time, I felt like I was drowning because we didn't have a CPO at that time. I had to hire a CPO. we were looking for additional like leaders to help run security engineering. And so I think that it just became really, really challenging. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm drowning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so at that point, I think I felt like I waited too long to like decide that that's what I needed, because I was trying another avenue, like a more traditional set of ways to do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is just not working.
It's just not working.
It's just not working. Yeah.
And so, Evan, in addition to Erica being awesome, clearly, what had you thinking this was the right role for you to take on and the right time?
I actively tried for several months to avoid it. It was actually, Eric and I were talking, and, when you're in leadership, it's lonely. I think we can all, like, if you're a leader, you know that. And Eric and I were already starting to, like, build that personal relationship where it was like, I don't know where it's going. I don't, like, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm going to help you hire people. So I think we interviewed like 20 or 30 people. And
Oh, wow.
to your earlier point about like finding the right person, we had all these people that we ended up hiring several of them, and they were doing fantastic in the company, but it wasn't like the right fit for this type of leadership role. And finally, there was my peer, the TL, who pulled me aside, and he was like, this is an Evan-shaped problem.
Yeah.
Like, you're a reformer, you know how to fix these problems, you clean things up, you understand security, think about it. And it wasn't until I had that conversation that I really started to consider, like, actually, I am interviewing all these people, and man, like, I had massive imposter syndrome. There were like written authors, PhDs, and then there's me, a self-taught nerd. And so it was about the time where it's like we're out of candidates, and what do we go do from here? And that was my kind of like call to action. It was, okay, Erica, I think I remember the call. I was like, Erica, just give it to me. I will take care of this. I had a chat with my wife. I have 2 young kids, and I knew what work I was going to take on. I got alignment at home.
Yeah.
And
super important.
Oh yeah,
super important.
If you're going into a growth role, anybody that is in your network that's supporting you needs to be prepared for that growth role, because for sure, like my spouse absolutely takes on a lot of the burden whenever, oops, there's a security incident in the middle of the night. I got paged. I'm out of commission for the next day. But I think knowing what the role was, knowing that I had a leader that I have a lot of respect for, and I know I can trust to teach me and give me honest feedback. And like I have a peer group that, I have implicit trust with as well. It made me feel very comfortable taking the role, but yeah, I tried my hardest to avoid it.
Yeah, I hear you. And so you two strike me as long-term leaders, right? But there's a sort of interesting pattern in the world of security where you have, these sort of short-term CISOs who come in. Either they're turnaround artists or they're people who come in and accomplish one big thing and then move on. And then you have folks who are really thinking long-term and are investing in themselves and their teams and the business and the customers. Like, how do you kind of make that decision on which one you're going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, almost every company that I've been at, I go in thinking I will retire at this company because I'm a highly committed human. Met my wife when I was 19, and we've been together for almost 20 years. So, like, I think I know who I am, and at the same time, I understand, like, I love board games and chess, and I'm a strategic thinker, and I find a lot of enjoyment from seeing, like, something that took 3 years to execute and moving all the pieces around to deliver is, like, the best for me. But I think it's important for every leader to know what kind of a person are you at your core, one. And then 2, like, I probably at some point in my career will have to, like, context switch over to be a short-term person because that's what the company needs. Like, I need to be able to go and pull every string possible and burn my cred to get every resource I need because we are way behind where we should be. And then I can give up my role. But I think it's the differentiator for me is knowing that a leader is going in with intention and a strategy. And maybe you need to pivot occasionally, or you get deliver you think you're going to be a 2-year person, and then everything's delivered, and you're like, 2 more years, 2 more years
Right.
is enough. So, but I think like where we're at right now, the leaders that came before us did incredible things. Like the things that they were done at Robinhood for the first 6 years of existence, I think there could be books written about. It was pretty incredible. So, I think though, knowing who you are and what the company needs is really important.
Okay. And so, Erica, how do you see yourself in this picture?
Well, I'm obviously a long-term person. I was at my last company for 20 some years.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah, I'm a lifer usually. I think that for me, it is more about what the company needs and the people and the culture. And so I tend to stay at a company because I truly enjoy the company
Yeah.
and I like the mission of the company. And I think that's the same thing with where I am, right? Like I really enjoy the people I work with. Um, and I think that thinking long term about where I want to take the security organization just really gets me really excited. And so for me, I think you have to have some of those disruptive moments. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you don't think 10 steps ahead, you aren't going to get very far. And things won't be as they'll break down eventually, right? And so you want to make sure you're thinking through what does that look like long term and what you're doing today, will it get you there? And I personally feel like that's a really, really important facet of it. And also not pivoting your team too many times because you do that, it's wasted time,
Yeah.
wasted resources. You'll hear me talk about not wasting resources a lot because I really am a big believer of utilizing resources appropriately. And one of those things is thinking strategically and long term. So you know exactly what you're doing today is going to help you tomorrow and 10 years from now.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a huge takeaway I'm taking from you and Evan is this idea that you've got to start with the right culture. You've got to give everybody license to be a security champion. And then your job is really about, threading that needle between linking strategy and tactics, right? And doing it in a way that's culturally aligned and that delivers the right outcome for your customers and the business. And you two have obviously been quite good at this for quite some time and also generous with your time today with us on stage. Let's close out with maybe a couple of best practices or piece of advice each of you would like to leave with our viewers.
Yeah, I think that what I would like to lead people with is when you're building something, make sure that you're questioning things. Digging into how things are actually architected is really, really important. But at the same time, being curious to see, is there another way to do it from a security standpoint? Sometimes what we think is the right way may not be the right way to make sure that that product or that business is able to move. So utilizing your creativity to build something amazing is really special. And I encourage people to do that, right? Think differently outside the box.
Awesome. Sage advice. Thank you for that. Evan, bring us home.
Yeah, I think, for every security or IT leader, as you're working at larger and larger enterprises, you're not going to be able to do everything. And empowering your individual contributors and your managers up to a safe point and having good governance and controls around that, whether it's your project lifecycle, your purchasing decisions, your financing decisions, whatever it can be, making sure that they know how to operate, they understand the cultural principles, your leadership principles, where your no-go areas are as a leader. Do not go and talk to finance with asking for headcount without talking to me first. Those things I think help create a really good culture of being able to ship things quickly and securely. But then separately, I would say it's really important, particularly in high growth companies, fast paced, to have high performance standards.
Yeah.
I think it does not, if you have really, really strong individual contributors and they don't see you performance managing well as a leader, and the people that aren't delivering as much are sitting around doing the same things, that creates a really bad culture. So I think of your role, whether you're the CSO or the deputy CISO or, a line manager, and performance managing is an indicator as well to what is rewarded in my department and how do we make sure everybody is moving at the right pace here. I think that's one key area. And the next one is standards. I was at my former employer as part of an SRE organization. Standards and being able to continually monitor and manage your standards and have the ability to have technical controls to verify against those standards, critical to scale.
Yeah, those closed loop mechanisms, absolutely. Awesome advice all around. Erica, Evan, thank you both so much being with us today at Reinforce. Sincerely, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your partnership. And wish you both the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.